classes participating, even though they're open to the community. My name is Imani Asikil. I'm the Director of Global Multicultural Student Affairs and Special Assistant to the President. And I'm the coordinator of these cultural events, and this one in particular. We've always taken great pride in bringing in high quality activities here at the college, and this is no different than any of the other ones that we have brought in over the years. You know, we celebrate Black history as a part of the missing pages of American history. So, you know, it's been kind of isolated and put off in a corner, but really it's just American history. And the story of Frederick Douglass is about as good an example of American history as you will find. It's a wonderful journey and thing. It was well received this morning at the Porter campus out in Wesley Chapel. And I think you will find it just as rewarding and exciting as they did this morning. So without any further ado, our speaker comes with many credentials of performing around the country. You know, it's a native in the Baltimore area. Maryland is where Frederick Douglass is from. Washington, D.C. On many college campuses and things. He's a part of the Tampa Bay chapter of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. He serves on many advisory committees around the Tampa Bay area and relationships to the preservation of the African American story. So, and now I present to you Mr. Donald Dowridge as Frederick Douglass.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I must say, before I begin, I am celebrating. I'm celebrating as a kid would do. I'm celebrating 10 years as Frederick Douglass, from 2009 to here we are in 2019. And it has truly been a blessing where Frederick Douglass has taken me throughout America. So, without further ado. Rosetta! Rosetta! Is that someone at the door? Open the door, let him in. Let him in. John! John! How are you, my friend? Good to see you. Good to see you. Please, come in. Come in. Bring your bags out. Let me get your bags for you. Please, come in. Okay, good, good. So what brings you up this way, John? Harper's Valley? You're planning on moving and taking out the slave owners of Harper Valley? Now, John, I got to tell you, I really don't think that's a good move. I see death and destruction. Wait a minute, wait a minute. I know you see death and destruction as well. But you're talking about killing the slave owners. But I'm talking about saving you, John, saving your life. I understand, John. Well, John, how long are you planning on staying? 3 weeks? Well, John, okay, you can stay no charge. What is that, John? You cannot stay for free? All right, well, since you want me to charge you, John, I'll charge you, okay. I'll charge you $3 a week. Is that okay? All right, okay, John. What I just gave you, that was John Brown. I don't know if anyone heard of John Brown, but John Brown came to my home while I was residing in Rochester, New York. His plan was to take out the slave owners in Rochester, but also Harper's Valley. John wanted me to go with him to help to annihilate the slave owners. But for some reason, I felt that was the wrong move because I saw death all over the walls. So I said, John, no, I cannot go with you. His friend that was with him, a free black, I even went to him. And I said, Dimples, do you really want to go? I beg you not to do this. And his only response was, I must go with the old man, Mr. Douglas. I must go with the old man. Well, they left after 3 weeks of staying there with me. And next thing I know, I got a notice that Mr. Brown had been hung. And back then, unlike now, and where we are in 2019, if a murderer commits a murder, they might take him to the electric chair. But in this instance, what they did then, they would have a town square, which would be like downtown, and they would hang you in front of everyone. And that's what they did with John Brown. They hung him in front of everyone. And he became sort of like a martyr, a hero to all the blacks because of the fact that he had the nerves of that a lot of the blacks did not have. And that is to stand up and fight for freedom from slavery. So John Brown, if you will, became a historical figure because of that instance. And it hurted me dearly once I found out that John Brown was hung. To move on. There were 3 men, 3 white men, that were running for president of these United States. One of the men was Douglas, and I believe his first name was Melvin Douglas. The second man was Mr. Richardson, I forget his first name. And the third one, of course, is a familiar name that you might be familiar with, Mr. Abraham Lincoln. Now, Mr. Douglas, at first I said, let me check on this guy, because him and I, we wear the same name. Well, once I read about Douglas and what his platform was in reference to he cared and then he didn't care in reference to the continuation and the ending of slavery. Mr. Richardson, he really didn't care at all. But that gentleman by the name of Abraham Lincoln, he struck me mighty hard because of the fact that one of his platform speeches is that somewhere down the line, yes, he could see the end of slavery. So I kind of went out and I started campaigning for Mr. Abraham Lincoln to become the president of these United States. So, as it happened, January of 1860, yes, Abraham Lincoln became the president of these United States. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was October of 1862, I went to the White House. Yes, that's me knocking on the front door, unlike today. It's kind of hard to get in the White House nowadays. But back then, you could just go knock on the door and you would get in. Maybe not as easy as that because of the color of my skin as a black man. However, going there and having that door open up, it was the security guards who said, "You are not welcome. If you want to come to this door, come in, you must go to the back door." Well, I stayed there. And behold, the angels must have been with me because I saw him walking. And I shouted out his name, "Mr. Lincoln! Mr. Lincoln!" And he backpedaled to look who was calling his name. And he said, "Mr. Douglas, that's you?" I said, "Yes, sir." So he said, "Let him in." So I went in, and we went to his office. When I went to his office, and please keep in mind, if you don't know, Mr. Abraham Lincoln was 6 feet 4 inches. I'm 6 feet 2 inches. And when we walked in, I shook his hand, and I just looked up at him because he was tall and very slim. And he looked down at me, and I said, "Mr. President?" Of course I was nervous. And he said, "Mr. Douglas, I've heard all about you. Please have a seat." So I had a seat. And I sat in that seat very intelligent as I was. And we began our dialogue. And he said, "Mr. Douglas, how can I help you today? What brings you to the White House?" And I said, "Sir, I come with 3 agendas on my mind. 1, the freedom of my people. Two, that the black man is able to serve in the Civil War. Not just serve, but serve evenly as the white man. And three, last but not least, I come to speak on the women's rights. That women of this country are able to vote and they are able to have the same rights that men do in this country. At that time, Mr. Lincoln, he interrupted me and he stood up and he went to the window, pulled it back, and he studied for a second. And then he turned around and he said, Mr. Douglas, I appreciate your requests and what you would like for your people. But I think at this time that I think we should wait. I think we should wait. Now, when Mr. Lincoln said wait, through my mind, I'm thinking, how far down in the future should we wait? Now, you can only imagine, 1860, calculate 100 years. Matter of fact, I'll put that out to the audience. 1860, 100 years will put you where?
1960.
1960. Now, they're saying 1960, blacks in this country will be free. And we are currently in 2019. So how many years ago would that be? That's almost what, 50 some years? So that means in 1960, blacks in this country would just be becoming free. So anyway, Mr. Lincoln, after he said what he said, I stood up and we shook hands. And as we shook hands, I left. As I left, I got outside of the gates of the White House and I stood there with my chest out. And yes, I felt big. I felt big because I was the first black man to enter into the White House. I felt big because I thought about the life that I come out of. I thought big to continue the fight for freedom. I felt big. Who am I? Well, let me take you back to the beginning. I stole these hands and I stole these feet. I'm a runaway slave. I was born in the Tuckahoe. They say the Hillsborough in eastern Maryland on a Lord's plantation. The Lord's plantation was the largest plantation in eastern Maryland. They had 500 slaves that worked for Mr. Lloyd. My mother, Miss Harriet Bailey. Miss Harriet Bailey, my mother, she was housed on a plantation 12 miles away. And she would run 12 miles barefooted to come to see her little Valentine, her little Frederick. And please understand, back then we didn't have electricity. We had candles. And she would come and she would pick me up and she would rock me. And she would sing to me, my little Valentine. Knowing that before the break of day, she had to be 12 miles away back on that plantation. Or else she stand to get a whipping. So I take it because she kept saying Valentine that my birthday is charted as February 14th, 1818. My mother, Harriet Bailey, I saw her maybe 3 or 4 times. She died when I was 7 years old. But please understand, when she died, I did not cry because she was like this wood here. We had no real relationship. So because we didn't have a real relationship, I didn't miss her. My grandmother, Betty Bailey, I stayed with her for a little time. And I still recall the time that she took me to another plantation. It seemed like we walked for like 100 miles. And when we got there, I heard her talking to Aunt Katie. Aunt Katie, and I heard that Aunt Katie and my mother, they really didn't get along. But Aunt Katie, she was very mean. She was a mean Aunt Katie. But anyway, my grandmother took me to play with the other kids, and come to find out my brother and my sisters was out there. And my grandmother, she went back in the kitchen to talk But in the meantime, I just stood there. I didn't play because I wanted to be with my grandmother. So I started crying. Where's my grandmother? I want my grandmother. And my brother came to me and he said, Grandma gone. Grandma gone? Grandma gone. She left. And that hurted me so much. And I just started kicking everything I could kick because I felt so alone because my grandmother, Betty Blding, had left. Next thing I know, my grandmother, who has taken care of my master and family, had passed away. She passed away in the cabin. And I also heard that upon her death, they didn't give her a funeral. They just dug a hole and just put it in the hole and covered it up. I know you're wondering, since I have not said it, who my dad was. Well, my father was no other than, as they say, Captain Anthony, Aaron Anthony. He was a white slave owner. They called him Captain because the majority of the time on the weekends, he would be on the Chesapeake, sailing in his sailboat. I'm yet to find a black man at this time that has a sailboat. Well, just to share with you how we lived, we had one pair of pants, one shirt, one pair of shoes. That's what the adults got. And that had to last for a whole year. The women, they got one dress that had to last them a whole year. Us children, we got a gown. And when we outgrew that gown, well, that was it. Food, how they fed us. We didn't have silverware or none of that nature. So we had our hand where we had to scoop up, or we had seashells that we had to use to scoop up our food. Sleeping arrangements. We didn't have nice comfy beds. We had the floor. And when it was cold outside, we had to all muster up together. And sometimes we would even be sleeping in potato sacks, wool potato sacks. Well, one night, while we were asleep, I heard a screeching noise. I heard a screaming. It was a woman's voice that was screaming and hollering. So I got up out of my bed and I went to see what this noise was. And when I got there, what I saw just startled me. It scared me. It frightened me. It was my Aunt Hester strung up as such with her back out. And my master, Aaron Anthony, whipping her, and saying, "You're mine. If I catch you with that other slave again, I'll kill you. You hear me?" And the more she cried, the more he whipped her. And he kept telling her to shut up, but he was whipping her. How can you shut up when you're being whipped? The guy she was seeing was Ned. He was a slave from another plantation. Master Aaron Anthony said she was mine, so you get the drift. Well, as I got older, they shipped me out. And I still recall Lucretia. Oh, I didn't tell you about Miss Lucretia, did I? Miss Lucretia, believe it or not, is Master Aaron Anthony's daughter. She's the daughter of the master who I am the son of, but she didn't know that I was her brother. And it's funny because when all the other little boys were screamed at and what have you, she would give me just about anything I wanted, not knowing that I was her brother. I guess it was, what they call it? I guess they called it the genes. G-E-N-E-S. Ties in automatically. Well, at the age of 7, Miss Lucretia called me and she said, "Frederick, come to the big house." So I made my way to the big house, and please keep in mind I'm only 7 or 8 years old. I make it to the big house, and she says, "You're going to take your bath." A bath? What is that? That's where you're going to get in the tub and you're going to wash yourself with nice clean water. Now keep in mind, for 7 years since I've been here on earth, my bath was at the community pond. What goes on in the community pond? Well, that's where the animals go in to drink and do their business. That's where they wash clothes at. That's where they use the water for cooking. And that's where we bathed at. But now I get to go upstairs on the second floor of the big house to the bathroom, to the tub, and take a nice clean bath. Well, I'm in that water. It's an hour already. Miss Lucretia, "Frederick, what you doing up there?" You've been up there for an hour. Get out that water. To be honest with you, my first bath, I really didn't want to get out that water because it was so good. Well, she came and she got me out of there. And at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I got the opportunity to wear my first pair of pants, first shirt, and shoes. They loaded me up on a carriage, and I got in that carriage, and we went straight from Eastern Maryland to Baltimore, Maryland. And when we got there, it was a big old gigantic house. And there were 3 people standing outside in front of the door. Those 3 people just happened to be Miss Sophia, her husband, Mr. Huard, and her son, Tommy Yard. And when I got out that carriage and I walked up, and please understand, if you're a slave, if you're black, you don't look white people in their face. And as I got closer, the more I dropped my head. And as I got close, and all of a sudden, I could see their feet, and I stopped. Miss Sophia. Hi, Frederick. Hi. And I'm looking down, and she's like, lift your head up, Frederick. You can look at me. I'm thinking to myself, she ain't going to kill me for looking at her. So I kept my head down. And as she got close, I could feel her breathing on me. And all of a sudden, she took her hands as such and put it under my chin, and she lifted my head up. And I had my eyes closed such as. And she said, open your eyes, Frederick. And I'm still thinking, this lady really want to get me killed. I ain't opened up my eyes. And she said, open my eyes. I could feel her breathing in my face. And when I finally opened up my eyes, I see the big blue eyes, the rosy cheeks, and the big wide teeth. And she like, hi, Frederick, you're home. Yes, ma'am. And all of a sudden, Master Ard stepped before me. And he said, Frederick, you're here to take care of Tommy. Tommy, that's who you take care of. You is his play toy. Yes, Master. I Tommy play toy. Thank you, Master. So as time went on, I noticed something about Tommy. I noticed that Tommy went to school. And I noticed Tommy came home with books. So when the family would leave, I would go upstairs and I would be sneaking trying to read. As a matter of fact, the family used to send me out on errands. And they paid me to go to the store. A question for you all. How much you think they paid me to go to the store? Take a guess. He says a penny, and you're a winner. That's right, they paid me 1 penny. But before I would leave the house, I would go to the kitchen. And when I would go to the kitchen, I would break up bread. And I would stuff my pockets with this bread. And then I would skip on to the store. And when I get to the store, there were little boys at the store. White boys. They were hungry. I was hungry. But we were hungry for 2 different things. They were hungry for education. I was hungry for education. They were hungry for food. So I would go to them. And they were like, hey, little Freddie. Hey, Freddie. And I'm like, hey, how y'all doing? Guess what? I got some bread. Now, somebody tell me how to spell hat. And they go H-A-T. And I'll say, that ain't how you spell hat. And they say, yes, it is. I said, well, spell it again. H-A-T. I told you that. No, spell it again. Then they go H-A-T. The reason I would have them to spell it 3 times because the first 2 times it went to my frontal lobe. The 3rd time it got into my memory. And that's how I learned. So what I would do, I would give them a piece of bread. So that's how we traded off. And so that penny that Master Ard would give me, I saved those pennies up. And I bought my first book, The Columbian Orator. The Columbian Orator contains speeches. Speeches from people such as giants, not people, but giants, such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Edgar Allan Poe, and various others who had written speeches. And I have you know, I memorized those speeches to the T. So much so that as I got older, maybe about 15, 16, Master noticed something about me. He said, wait a minute, that Frederick is a little too smart these days. So he began to loan me out. And he sent me off to the slave breaker. The slave breaker, no other than Master Corvée. And when I got on that plantation, I have you know, I walked on that plantation walking like this. 6 months later, I was walking like this. Because he whipped me almost every day, every day. So one day, me and a couple of other slaves, we were out fanning the mill. And as we were fanning the mill, I started getting a pain in my side. And I fell. And one of the slaves said, Frederick, you better get up. You know Master Corvée, he's a snake. He'll come up and show right here, you won't even know where he came from. So I tried to get up. And I did a little more work. And I had that pain again. This time I went down and I couldn't get up. And all of a sudden I had my eyes closed, but when I opened my eyes, who was standing before me? Master Corvée. And Master Corvée asked me, Frederick, what's wrong? I fell into his trap. What's wrong, Frederick? I said, Master, I'm hurting right here, my side, it hurts. He said, move your hand out the way so I can see it. So I moved my hand and he kicked me in my side. And then he had a switch and he started whipping me with the switch and blood was just flowing down the side of my head. Well, I had enough strength to get up and run. And I ran back to Master Ard. And I burst through the door and I said, Master, please move me, Master, please. They're killing me. Master Ard just stood up and he said, Frederick, you got a whole year there. If you don't leave, I'll whip you myself. And I got to tell you, I am so thankful for Miss Sophia. Because Miss Sophia, she took a breath. And then she uttered the words, Hugh, let him stay tonight. Come, Frederick, come. So we went upstairs and she washed me up and she got all the blood and stains off of me and she allowed me to sleep. And the next day, which was Saturday morning, I have you know this, as I'm coming down the stairwell, there's a smell that's going up in my nostrils. What smell is that? Bacon, eggs, flapjacks, coffee, toast. Oh, it smells so good. So, quite naturally, they're sitting at the table having breakfast. So, I come to the kitchen table. I put my hand on the chair like I'm getting ready to sit down. And Master said, the door. So right away, I leave. And I go back to Master Corvée. Now keep in mind, pay attention to my right leg here. As I come, the fence is here. I'm climbing over the fence. Who's coming? Master Corvée. What he got in his hand? That whip. Notice my right leg. I take it from here and I run. And I'm gone for another day. The next day I come back again. Who's coming at me again? Master Corvée with a whip. So I take that same right leg and I run. But this time when I run, there's a free black man and his family living out in the woods in the cabin. He summons me. So I go to his house. And he let me stay overnight. The next morning he said, Fred, come go with me. So we go out to the woods. As we get out to the woods, he's digging like a dog. He goes way down and he pulls up a rabbit foot. And he said, Frederick, this rabbit foot will save your life. He will not touch you again. I'm like, man, I don't believe in superstition. He said, okay, well, don't believe in superstition and go back and get a whipping. I said, give it here. I'll put it in my right pocket. Put it in my right pocket. And this time I go back. Well, here's that right leg again. Who's coming? Master Corvée with no whip in his hand. And when he gets up to me, he said, Frederick, welcome back, Frederick. Come, let's talk. How about you take the rest of the day off? And take it easy. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that rabbit foot sure works. So he said, take the day off. Matter of fact, tomorrow, how about you go to the barn and clean out the barn? I'm like, okay, Master, no problem. Monday morning come, I'm out in the barn, and I'm cleaning the barn. And I got the rake, and I'm raking it up, and all of a sudden the door opens. And I just happened to look, and when I look, it's Master Corvée with the whip. And all of a sudden he whips it out, and it wraps around my leg. And as it wraps around my leg, he's pulling me, but I had the gall to reach down and grab it. And I pull him to me. And as I pull him to me, we start going at it. And we're fighting for 2 straight hours. I'm 16 years old. And in the middle of it, Master said, Frederick, you must want to die today. I said, Master, I guess I'm going to die because you ain't going to whip me no more. So we started going at it again. Now, as we're going at it, he noticed one of the slaves walking by. He calls him, David, get in here, get Frederick. So he comes in. And I said, David, you don't touch me. And he said, oh, Frederick, I ain't gonna touch you. So I kicked him. And he went on about his business. The next guy, he came, he opened up the door. He just went like this. And then he shut the door and went on about his business. And then the third person was a burly woman. And I'm just praying that she don't come and hurt me. Because I knew if she would have came, she would have beat me. So she said to Master, Master, I'm not here to help you fight Frederick. That's your fight. You fight on your own. So she left. And I said, wow, thank you. Well, I have you know, when the fight was over, the question is, who got up and who stayed down? Who got up and who stayed down? Well, I got up and Master stayed down. And 2 days later, Master said to me, he said, Frederick, I could have whipped you. Don't have me come at you again. In my mind, I said, Master, you don't want none of this. You better keep it walking. So I stayed there for the next 6 months and Master never touched me again. He might have got in my face. But I will share this with you. Even though Master didn't touch me again, it hurted me when I saw all the other slaves get whipped like they did. Even though he didn't touch me, it hurted me to see those slaves get whipped like they did. And I will say, after that incident, I was free in form, but a slave still in fact. Well, as time went on, they moved me to another plantation, Master Freeman. Now, Master Freeman, the free, F-R-E-E, free. Even though I was on this plantation as a slave, he allowed me to do what I wanted to do. And what I used to do, since he gave me the freedom to do what I wanted to do, I would have sometimes up to 50 slaves in a cabin, or maybe out in the woods. And those 50 slaves, I'm teaching them how to read by way of the Bible. I'm teaching them how to read by way of any newspaper I can get. Teaching them to speak with vocabulary through the means of how I learned. Teaching them how to read through the Columbian order. Well, in the midst of them, there was one. His name was Judas. And Judas went back and told the slave master that Frederick, he's out there teaching them slaves how to read. And before I know it, coming through the door, here were the slave owners with the sticks and the bats and the bricks, and they beat us. And they took me to jail. Well, I have you know, when they took me to jail, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. You know why that was the best thing that ever happened to me? Because in that jail, I got a bed, comfortable. In that jail, I got 3 meals, good. In that jail, I got to take showers, wonderful. Well, my master, Huard, there was talk of sending me down to Alabama and selling me, because I was just one of them smart Negroes, and they wanted to get rid of me. Well, my master, Huard, came and got me, and he took me back to Baltimore. And when he took me back to Baltimore, guess what he did, y'all? He taught me a trade. He taught me how to be a caulker. That's right, to build ships. He taught me how to build ships. And he would send me out. He would allow